So I'll ask you again, if the world is worth saving, and it should be, I mean, that's where I don't know about you, that's where I keep all my stuff. And everybody I love is in the world, so if the world burns, we all burn together. So maybe the world is worth saving. So I ask you, what is it then that's going to save the world? Love. It's the only thing that can save the world. Is the world going to be saved by pessimism, by resentment, by anger, by contempt, by hatred? You've been hearing me say it since the beginning. Life is suffering, but man, it is so much more than just that. And I know if you watch your newsfeed, you can get so hung up on that suffering bit and how terrible the world is. But man, I promise you, if you just stop and look around sometimes, you'll see some of the most beautiful things in the world. And maybe that's part of what has us so melancholy or depressed sometimes. It's a hopelessness that we think that things are just all screwed up, so why bother? Well, we bother because of that's what's going to change the world. That's what's going to make it better. You don't, not necessarily the whole world from your point of view, but man, your world, you love people. Oh, back to our scratching our chins, but then they backstab you because people are disloyal. I guess people are disloyal, and people are loyal also, depending on the people. But that's got nothing to do with you. The question is, how do you allow yourself to behave in that environment? Do you allow yourself to become jaded, angry, resentful, and full of contempt, and part of the problem that you're complaining about? That's weak, man. That's easy. It takes strength to be gentle. It takes strength to be kind, to be able to stand up against that. I'm not saying to be passive and weak and just, I'm going to love anyway, but to be able to say, no, I'm going to love anyway. To be strong enough that you can actually love despite all of that. No matter how hard people tear down at you, no matter how hard the world attacks you, to be able to stand up against it and say, if the world is going to be saved, it's going to be saved by love. And so what is it that's going to save the world, if anything's going to save the world?
Understanding.
What's that?
Understanding.
Understanding? Understanding is a function of familiarity. So one of the reasons that we don't like people is because we don't understand where they're coming from. It's a difficult but necessary realization in life that most people, the overwhelming majority of people you encounter in your life, are not evil. They're not stupid. I mean, I don't know if you know people like this, or maybe it's you, that you're just convinced that everybody you encounter is stupid. 25% of the population is above average. 25% of the population is below average. 50% of the population is in the middle, roughly. So 75% of the people you encounter on a daily basis are either average or above average. 25% of the people you encounter are below average, but by and large, not really, because they're so below average that you wouldn't even encounter them. They wouldn't be in the places where you are. And so if you find yourself constantly, God, everybody's so stupid, everybody's so stupid. I saw somebody walking around with a t-shirt that said, I see stupid people. And I always wonder about people like that who wear those really sarcastic t-shirts where they feel like they have to insult the world. Or they have those bumper stickers that they feel like they have to insult the world. And it's like, what are you hiding? What are you compensating for in your own life that you feel like you have to insult the world? If you think the whole world is so stupid, then of course, I mean, just tell me you're rejected by people without telling me that you're mostly rejected by people. That's the way we justify it. Oh, I just don't, I just don't get along with people. Why? Because they're just so stupid. It has nothing to do with your insecurities, though, right? It has nothing to do with how you view the world, right? Of course it does. It's a defense mechanism, by and large. And I'm not saying we should get along. I'm not saying we can't. I'm not saying we can get along with the whole world. I was going to say, I'm not saying we should get along with the whole world. We should get along with the whole world. I'm not saying we can, because I think I told you guys in the very first week you were in here, I'm like coffee, I'm not for everybody, but then again, so is everybody else. And it's not necessarily that we can get along with the whole world, but it doesn't mean we have to find ourselves at war with the whole world either. Because if I asked you the kind of people you want to hang out with, you're describing them in this way. And I know I kind of oversimplified a little bit about what you were saying, but this is really what it amounts to. There's a closeness, there's a familiarity. And it's difficult for us to not like or to hate people who we understand, even if we disagree with them. And this is why under certain political climates like we're in right now, when you hear people say, if you believe X, Y, and Z, don't even talk to me. Or they try to shut people down from expressing opinions. Because as soon as you shut people off from expressing their opinions, you make it impossible to become familiar with them and to come close to them. Why? You talk to them and you find out something strange. Like, for example, you find out that they might have parents who love them. It's weird to think of it that way, but it's true. They might have parents who love them. They might have friends who love them, family who love them. It might turn out that they do nice stuff. Who knows? Who knows? But you would never know that unless you talked to people. Now, of course, with 8 billion people on the planet, you can't get to know everybody and come close to them and become familiar with them. But generally speaking, if you realize, I talked to 10 people, and 9 of them who do open up to me, I open up to them. 9 of them I tend to get along with, pretty well. Then you can probably start to assume 90% of the world I could get along with if I just talked to them, if they just talked to me. But that's the bridge. We have to talk. If we're not talking, we're punching. If we're punching, we're probably not talking. At least nothing good. So I'll ask you again, if the world is worth saving, and it should be. That's where I don't know about you, that's where I keep all my stuff. And everybody I love is in the world, so if the world burns, we all burn together. So maybe the world is worth saving. So I ask you, what is it then that's going to save the world? Love. It's the only thing that can save the world. Is the world going to be saved by pessimism? By resentment? By anger? By contempt? By hatred? Bang up job we're doing with some of that so far, but you're going to notice that people who do destroy things, that is what motivates them. The people who are saving the world are the people who are carrying the world with love, and a big part of love is sacrifice, self-sacrifice. There's no greater love that a person has, but that they would give their life for their friends. There's no greater love, probably beyond that even, that a person would give their life for strangers. I'm not saying you should run around and give your life up for strangers, but that would be an ultimate expression of love, and you'd only do that if you have a deep love and optimism for people. So maybe not strangers, that would be cool, but maybe the people who are closest to you, because the people who are closest to you have opened up to you, you're familiar with them, it's easier. To sacrifice yourself for strangers means being able to imagine abstractly, you know what, these are people that if I did talk to them, and if they did talk to me, then they would be close and familiar to me. So just because I haven't talked to them yet doesn't mean that doesn't mean they couldn't be friends. So you're almost sacrificing yourself for people who could be friends. Yeah, Darlene, what kind of an experience do you think people could share that would bring them close? Your dad beat you. My dad beat me. Hey. Could be, because that's the kind of thing that helps shade the world. It helps to color the world, the perspective from which you see it. So if that's what shades the world, and if that's the perspective from which you see it, it becomes difficult to think, especially when we're younger, we kind of hold the elbow like this and we say, nobody understands me. No one can understand what I've been through. And all of a sudden you're like, well, what have you been through? You wouldn't understand. And then someone else is standing next to you and they're like, yeah, I hear you. My dad beat me. Your dad beat you? Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, there is somebody else in this world who can understand me, who comes from that same perspective, whose world is shaded by the same ways. It doesn't have to be something that extreme, but yeah, it's called trauma bonding. You can bond over trauma. Who's your favorite musical artist? That's one of the ways that we bond with people. You like them? Oh, okay. We have a musical thing in common. And then that's a little bit of a bridge that you can build into. It's one of the reasons we wear t-shirts from artists we like. Because as soon as you see that person, you're like, you like so-and-so? Hey, I like so-and-so. Or, I'll have students who will come in Monday from a concert they went to Saturday, and they'll be wearing their stuff from the concert, and then there'll be somebody else on campus who's wearing it. I don't know if you know each other, but I know that when I was in high school, we'd see somebody else with it, and you'd kind of give them the nod, like, well, actually, we couldn't even afford the t-shirts back when I was in school, but if you saw someone with the same t-shirt, you'd give each other the nod, like, oh, you like them? I like them too, all right. I was in Paris one time, and I saw this kid, probably like 13, 14 years old or so, wearing a System of a Down t-shirt. And I was like, that's dope. That's dope. All those thousands and thousands of miles away from Los Angeles, and yet they're wearing the t-shirt. You know, there's a connection that's there. And that's the sort of thing that's a small familiarity, maybe an experience, maybe something that you like. Yeah. We can't discount the idea that we don't have to be the same people to get along with other people. Like, you can have a sister who's so dramatically different. I think one of the reasons when you guys turn your journals in, I typically only read the journals that have A's, 90% or better. Those, if you got 90% or better, I read your journal. But I also lower it from there too. It ends up taking me like a whole day, like 8-10 hours reading the journals, because I really enjoy your perspective. This is one of the reasons that when people turn stuff in that's obviously not from them, or it's just like gibberish, it's like, come on, man. Like, and it's not just that you're cheating yourself, but I also feel a little bit cheated in a certain way, because I want to see what your perspective is, because I hope I haven't lived my own life. I hope I'm living my own life. I hate for this to be the end of it. All of a sudden, something falls through the roof. But I'm living my own life. I have my own perspective. I go out of my way to see other people's perspectives. But no matter how long I live, it's not long enough. There's just too much to do. And the problem with life is not that there's nothing to do. The problem with life is that there's just, it's overwhelming if you really understand how much there is to do. I can't, and that's just this planet. There's a whole universe that's out there. And so what that means is that when I read what you write in your journal, I get to live your life a little bit, which means that my life has now expanded in its scope. Every single person whose stuff I read, I get to add more and more and more and more and more to my life from their lives. I can basically take your life and add a little bit to mine. I've lived Dostoevsky's life. I've read his stuff. It's amazing to see what a person with his insight. Look at this dude. What do you think of when you look at this dude? What's that? Depressed? This is a dude who's probably the greatest novelist to ever live. He writes incredible novels. I don't like novels. I read his novels because he's so damn good. His bad guys, you might sit there sometimes and be like, are they bad? Yeah, they're a bad guy. They're a bad guy. Because they're so multidimensional. You can see why they're a bad guy, and yet not forgive the fact that they're a bad guy. Like, you see the Disney, like when they're doing all these things now, like these lore movies where they're going back to like Cruella de Vil, and then they try to make her like a sympathetic character. Dude, when she's an adult, she kills puppies and she makes coats out of them. She is not a sympathetic character. But the movie that they made about her, they try to make her sympathetic. That's terrible. It blurs the lines. And that, by the way, it's also juvenile. It's also rudimentary. It's basic. It's trying to say, well, nobody's all good or all evil. And that's true, but can you do it in a way that the person is still a villain, though? Because that's important, because this is the real world. Dostoevsky's able to do this. He has a character in one of his books where it's like a little excerpt from it where it's referred to as the Grand Inquisitor. And in short, it takes place during the Spanish Inquisition. If you're familiar, you're familiar. If not, the story can still make sense. But the Catholic Church throughout Spain is essentially seizing control. And they're going to people and asking them, are you Catholic? That's the Inquisition. And then they want to make sure that you're Catholic enough. And if you're not, you're thrown in jail and you're re-educated. It happened. And so he has this character, the Grand Inquisitor. And again, part of the Catholic Church, he's the head guy from the Inquisition. And Jesus shows up in Spain. They arrest him. And they take him aside, they put him in prison, and the Grand Inquisitor is talking to him. And essentially he's saying, listen, we know who you are. It's not like he's saying, you're not really Jesus. He's saying, we know who you are. We know that you're the real guy. I know that you're the real guy. But here's the problem. Right now, we're doing some incredible work for your church right now. But you showing up right now is going to mess all that up. So for your own sake, or for the sake of the church, we got to arrest you. And he goes on, and you can look at his motives and say, well, the way he's explaining it, it's not like he's power hungry. It's not like we want to be in control. It's not like that at all. He really seems to believe that he's doing something good, but it's so obviously bad. And this is a lot of people in life. It's so obviously like we're doing the wrong thing, or a person has said the wrong thing, and yet you can look at their motives and go, yeah, but they're all right. And they're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to do the best thing. And it begs this question now. Do we judge people by their outcomes, or do we judge people by their motives? If a person is trying to do a good thing, and yet a bad thing happens, do we get angry at them? And yet if a person is trying to do an evil thing and a good thing happens, do we praise them? These are the hard questions of life, but these are the kinds of things that Dostoevsky writes about. Dostoevsky, Nietzsche said, is the only psychologist that he could ever learn anything from. Dostoevsky wasn't even a psychologist. He was just a novelist. He just understood humans so incredibly well. Why? Because he studied people. He talked to everybody he possibly could so he could understand humanity. So he could write novels that we can read now 100 years later, 150 years later, and still say, wow, that could have been written today. Incredible. My point is just look at this dude. This guy wrote so deeply and insightfully and beautifully about love that it's almost incomprehensible. And you'd never know it from looking at the dude. He doesn't look like a guy who would be writing so deeply about love. If you want to see something incredible, just look up Dostoevsky quotes love. And you can scroll through pages of his comments about love. It's incredible what the guy writes. So he understands something about love. But here's the thing, he also understands suffering. He also understands happiness. He also understands joy. And he can see them all as part of a big spectrum of human emotions. So what is it to be a human? Is it to be in love, or is it to be in hate, or is it to have the best motives and yet be unclear about them? Is it to suffer? Is it to be in joy? And the answer is yes. It's all of these things. Some people are more of these things than others. This is true. And some of you are, I see it. You walk in here, man. Some of you guys are just so melancholy and depressed, and I see it. You walk in, you can smile. You can even open up your eyes and smile and say things. But I see it. I recognize it. And some of you guys are really, really happy. And you're really joyful. That's dope. Some of you guys are going through some hard things. Some of you, the hardest thing that you're going through is that you're not going through anything hard. And you can see the whole spectrum of human emotion up here if you pay attention to it. And part of the importance there probably is not to call people out for those things, because who wants to be called out for things? I'm sure you all have those teachers who take you outside. How are you? What are you going through right now? Because they got an email about something, And I figure, I don't know, maybe this isn't the best place to take you outside. How are you feeling? Do you want a pamphlet? Do you want a referral to a phone number you can call, a hotline? The important thing is, as he points out, where there's love, you can even live without happiness, because you can love something so much. I began this whole thing by asking if you love the world. I'm sure the world that so many people encounter is like, it's scratching our chin and frowning, and it's war, and we're so mean to each other, and climate change, geez Louise, and you know what? We don't deserve dogs. It's like, come on, dude. Have you not seen the world and how beautiful it is? And the people in it? It's like, there's war. Yeah, how many people are doing that? And how many people are struggling to suffer through it and just want to live and help each other do that? Most of the wars and most of these things, they're launched by very few people, but there's an important lesson there. They're fought by people who say, okay, whatever you say, I'm just gonna go along. And this isn't like a hippy-dippy thing of like, if we all just put our guns down and refuse to fight, we'd get along. No, if we put our guns down, we hit each other with rocks, because that's part of what we do. But here's another thing that we do. We hit each other with rocks, and somebody runs over and tries to save your life without even knowing who you are. That's beautiful too. Yeah, there's misery. Yeah, there's suffering. But there's also, life is, like you've been hearing me say it since the beginning, life is suffering, but man, it is so much more than just that. And I know if you watch your news feed, you can get so hung up on that suffering bit and how terrible the world is. But man, I promise you, if you just stop and look around sometimes, you'll see some of the most beautiful things in the world, dude. And maybe that's part of what has us so melancholy or depressed sometimes. It's a hopelessness that we think that things are just all screwed up, so why bother? Well, we bother because of that's what's going to change the world. That's what's going to make it better. You don't not necessarily the whole world from your point of view, but man, your world, you love people. But then back to our scratching our chins, but then they backstab you because people are disloyal. I guess people are disloyal, and people are loyal also, depending on the people. But that's got nothing to do with you. The question is, how do you allow yourself to behave in that environment? Do you allow yourself to become jaded, angry, resentful, and full of contempt, and part of the problem that you're complaining about? That's weak, man. That's easy. It takes strength to be gentle, it takes strength to be kind, to be able to stand up against that. I'm not saying to be passive and weak and just, I'm going to love anyway, but to be able to say, no, I'm going to love anyway. To be strong enough that you can actually love despite all of that. No matter how hard people tear down at you, no matter how hard the world attacks you, to be able to stand up against it and say, if the world is going to be saved, it's going to be saved by love. Because the people who are destroying it are not loving. That should just be obvious to us in our face. But it takes strength. That's true. So life is sweet, man. Even in sorrow. Even in the depths of misery, you can find something beautiful. You have to look for it sometimes harder than others. That's true. But I promise you, man, if you just look, you're going to find it. It's kind of like a reason to continue. If you just look, you're going to find it. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques. Happy Wednesday.